Welcome to the first of the parallel sessions today on festivals, public space and inclusivity. This is parallel session 2. I hope you're in the right room. My name's Guy Osborne. I was a member of the team along with Andrew Smith looking at Finsbury Park as part of this project. It's been a great morning so far. I'm looking forward to this. We've got to run a fairly tight ship for these sessions, so I'm going to be fairly light touch in terms of chairing. In a moment, we'll go to our first presenter. Just a very brief bit of housekeeping. Each presenter's got 15 minutes. With 2 minutes to go, I'll give them a 2-minute warning, and then we'll have to cut it off at 15 minutes. We've got 5 minutes for questions, but the easiest way for us to do questions is for you to post them into the chat. Then at the end of the 15-minute presentation, we'll review those and respond to those as needed, then go on to the next presentation. Okay, so without further ado, I shall pass over to our first presenter today. And this is Gustavo, who's speaking on residential neighbourhoods or event venues, looking at the situation in Lisbon. Over to you, Gustavo.
Thank you. Supposedly you're seeing my presentation already in full screen. Yeah. I guess that's a yes. Hello everyone, my name is Gustavo Lopes dos Santos and I'm a PhD student in Territorial Engineering in Instituto Superior Técnico, University of Lisbon. However, today I'm talking to you from Gustave Eiffel University in Paris, which is the next Olympic city, and that is because I study the Olympic Games. I'm one of this year's Olympic Study Center students. I study the impacts of Olympic Agenda 2020 in urban planning for the Games. So I am here presenting a preliminary research, if we can call it that, titled Residential Neighborhood or Event Venue, Conflicting Use of Public Space in Parque das Nações, Lisbon. And well, what does this presentation has to do with my PhD? In fact, nothing. I am not studying this particular case study, nor the use of public space for events, but as you will understand, I'm particularly fascinated by this area of Lisbon, and I guess I'm already searching for a postdoctoral research project. So I wanted to address this topic for long and saw in this conference an appropriate place to hear your opinions. I'm not bringing you results, but only questions for further research. So I think the title of the presentation speaks for itself in terms of what it will address. We'll have a look at the history of the site, do a virtual site survey, and talk about the events happening in the area that make use of the public space to discuss the conflicts of use arising in order to draw some research questions for further development. Few data was collected, and mostly from social media and networks. I also resorted to my own insight experience because before my PhD, I created a company called Sailor Walking Tours when I did tours for tourists and schools in the area and experienced in first-hand those conflicts of use. So I leave you the Instagram of Sailor, not for advertising as the company is deactivated since 2018, but for you to get to know the area by yourself through pictures if you wish. So Parque das Nações, it was for many centuries a rural area. At the beginning of the 20th century, it started being occupied by a lot of important industries, but lacking urban planning. At some point, industries decided to relocate, leaving the area abandoned and degraded. And during more than 50 years, this became the poor area of the city, with large zones of abandoned containers, sanitary landfills, scrapyards, and warehouses. But in 1992, the area was chosen to host Expo 98, with the objective of using the international exhibition to regenerate the entire degraded plot. And the construction work started in 1994 by the dismantlement of the industrial plot occupying 330 hectares and 5 kilometers of riverfront. So all the existing buildings were dismantled, and then with a deadline of 4 years only, all the venues, public spaces and transport infrastructures were quickly built. Nowadays, Parque das Nações is the newest centrality of Lisbon and one of the most diverse ones. In the first 10 years after the event, the economic revenue of Expo 98 was 10 times higher than the investment. More than 20,000 people live here, mostly in the north and south residential areas, and especially from higher social classes, since this is one of the most expensive areas of Lisbon. More than 300 companies have their offices here, mostly in the central area, creating more than 10,000 jobs. And also a high-quality event venue was created with indoor space for exhibitions, conferences, and shows, also with a unique outdoor environment. It is important to say, however, that for some years, the area started degrading and had several and severe problems with lack of maintenance. But it was due to the resident, working, and visiting populations that the site survived and avoiding an overwhelming fate like that of Expo 92 in Seville, for example. So the area has several important buildings, like the Orient Station, which was designed by Santiago Calatrava, right in front of one of the largest shopping centers in the country, and those that are perhaps the most expensive residential towers of Lisbon. There is an area with several hotels and headquarters of companies, including the Vodafone headquarters, a sports TV channel, and also the Lisbon Casino. In the south residential area, there is a marina and a theater, and you can also see that the architecture of each building is quite unique and different from the standard. And in the north residential area as well. More to the north, there is an area that is not completed yet. However, it will be regenerated into an urban green park for the World Youth Day, Lisbon 2023, which is the biggest Christian event in the world. Portugal expects 1 to 2 million visitors, including the Pope himself. There is also the longest bridge in Europe with 17 kilometers, the largest indoor aquarium of Europe, which is the #1 attraction of Lisbon on TripAdvisor, the highest building of Portugal, and several green areas all around, as well as...
Gustavo, can I interrupt for 1 second? Can we just check? Are you sharing screen as well? The slides seem to have stuck on slide 1.
Okay, you should be able, yeah.
Sorry, can I interject? I think Stefano might be sharing his screen.
Oh.
Could Stefano not share his screen yet, please?
Gustavo, if you just click the share button again and reinitiate your share, you should be okay. Sorry for not noticing that.
Okay. I'll give you some more time, Gustavo, don't worry.
Okay, so are you now seeing the slides?
Yep.
Okay, just to let you know, some of the pictures I was showing to you.
Gustavo, have a couple more minutes. Apologies for that. Have a couple more minutes.
Okay, because if you don't get to see the area, it's kind of...
Yeah, no worries. Take a bit more time. Sorry about that.
So this is the area before the works of Expo 98. This is Expo 98 and some works during the Expo. So now this is the map of the area. I was talking about the residential areas in the north and south, these rectangles, and more of a business area. And here we have the area where events happen. So I was talking about the station designed by Santiago Calatrava, the towers, also the area of the business, one of the residential areas. You can see the architecture is quite unique. The other residential area, and here the place where is going to happen the World Youth Day with Pope in 2023. The bridge, the aquarium that I was talking about, the tower, the highest tower of Portugal, and I think we were here, so several green areas. And you can also see that there's a lot of urban art all around. So in this area for the events, we have the International Fair of Lisbon, which has 4 pavilions. Each has the size of a football field, and in total there are 10,000 square meters of exhibition space. And also a 5th pavilion is also planned here as part of the contract with Web Summit, which is an event I'm sure those of you from Dublin will know about. The Altice Arena, which is one of the largest indoor arenas of Europe with 2 rooms. The biggest has a seating capacity of 12,500 people with a maximum of 20,000 people. And finally, the Ex-Libris of Portuguese Architecture, the Pavilion of Portugal. This is in large part the reason for its architect, Cisa Vieira, to be awarded with the Pritzker Prize of Architecture, and that roof is concrete, by the way. So the pavilion was recently allocated to the University of Lisbon, but is still not in use, and thus it is usually a supportive venue for the events happening in the Altice Arena and in the International Fair of Lisbon. So I want to make sure that you realize that although this area is not always packed with people, this is not only an event venue. For you to have an idea, in this red box, there are close to 30 restaurants, bars, or coffee shops, and also a gymnasium. So I'll show you now the main vehicle and pedestrian flow. So in Portugal, roads are classified from level 1, which are highways, to level 5, which are local accesses. In the area, only the bridge is level 1, but the main roads of Parque das Nações are level 2. which means they are roads vital for the functioning of the city. Then we have a level 3 streets, some level 4, and the remaining are level 5. In terms of pedestrian flows, they are mostly from the station to the business area, from the station to the shopping center and riverfront, and from these areas to the aquarium and all along the riverfront as well. So I focused the analysis on the year of 2018 while I was still at the site doing tours. So this slide shows the calendar of events in that year. In red are the days of events causing restrictions to the use of public space. And in yellow are the ones also with restrictions due to the preparations for those events. In total, there were 143 days of restrictions to the public space due to events, which is about 40% of the year. 2018 was also the 20th anniversary of Expo 98. So besides these, many other small events occurred in the streets along the year. These events used the public space differently. So sports events made use of these areas, but the pedestrian circulation rarely was obstructed, although with some intermittent constraints to let athletes pass. For cycling or running events, sometimes the roads in the bottom of the image, level 2 roads, were cut, but always on weekends. This is the common configuration of the use of public space for concert shows or other events in Altice Arena, with restrictions to the circulation mostly due to the placing of fences to form queues to enter the arena, and also a level 4 road cut. And this is the usual for events in the international fair, so more road cuts, but these are roads that mostly serve for logistics like cargo handling for the events or the restaurants. So many times these three configurations occurred simultaneously in the same days with different events happening in the two venues or outdoor. So I want to focus on these 4 events, although not by this order. The Eurovision Song Contest, that I believe most of you know. The Diamond Jubilee Celebration, which was a religious celebration with the presence of the spiritual leader of the Shia Ismaili Muslims. I'm not sure, but it might be the equivalent to the Pope for Christians. The Superbox Super Rock, which is an annual music festival and one of the most popular in Portugal, and the Web Summit, which is Europe's biggest tech conference. So all these events are internationally renowned. This yellow line was my tour and stops, and I decided to show it here so you can better understand why I started thinking about this research and why it made me look deeper to see if other people were also feeling affected by the events. So like any other business, I did an investment, paid licenses and insurances to be allowed to conduct tours, and also paid to be a member of the Tourism of Portugal, which was a partner of many of these events. So I tried to collect some additional data from restaurants in the area and from the local council, but did not get any in time for this presentation, except data from this gym, which is located inside the building of the International Fair. I will use the number of daily entrances to the gym to illustrate how this business was affected by the events. So, as you can see, during Web Summit, my tour was not affected that much, but the numbers of daily entrances in the gym are absolutely clear regarding the impact on the business. So I also collected some online comments in response to the announcement of restrictions for Web Summit done by the local council on Facebook. And here's one: don't put the entrance of Web Summit on the cycle path. It's highly irritating. Also teach your people to have some respect for people who live here. So the remaining comments to this publication were all complaining that while the council invested in events, schools and healthcare centers were missing, as well as street maintenance, etc. Now, for the Eurovision, what I considered that was the biggest problem was the duration of restrictions. So the event lasted for 5 days, but the circulation was constrained for 42 days, with additional road cuts in the event days. So contrary to other events, preparations were carried out with the precinct closed. As you can see, my tour was severely affected, and because I was at the site every day, I can assure you that there was absolutely no movement inside the precinct until 1 week before Eurovision. So basically, the public space was closed for the organizers' convenience. And these pictures illustrate the lack of respect to the public space and patrimony. So the Pavilion of Portugal, for example, is classified as a monument of public interest. And for that, it has a protection area that you can see here where nothing can be built. Well, but I guess it's okay to showcase it worldwide, full of tents. I also witnessed several tourists asking for permission to go inside the precinct and take photos of the pavilion because they went to the area mostly for that purpose. So all this could be acceptable if there was a need to close the precinct, of course. But again, I'm not exaggerating when I say that there was absolutely nothing inside happening inside the precinct, at least outdoor. So now the Diamond Jubilee was a much more serious situation, which even made the local mayor to complain against the City Council of Lisbon, which was the promoter of the event, like most of these events, not the local council. So my tour was completely compromised. I did not work during those days, so I could not take advantage of the increased number of tourists. And it is also absolutely clear how the gym was also affected by this event. And also notice how isolated the restaurants are. So someone coming from the shopping center would have to walk an additional kilometer besides the usual 500 meters to reach the restaurant. So, and also all major pedestrian flows were also compromised. There were dozens of negative online comments to this event. I selected a few. How is it possible to authorize this? It is a constant abuse against the residents. On top of all, residents are never consulted. When will people that live here and pay the taxes have the right to circulate freely like in any other area of the city? This is the most expensive zone of Lisbon, and the circulation of residents is always constrained. And finally, someone from the local council should walk around the site to see its state. And the event is not even over yet, everything dirty. So additionally, there were severe damages to the public space that were only repaired 2 months later. And guess when? Right before Web Summit. So it is important to keep in mind that the restrictions were constant during 40% of the year. This has obviously an impact on residents. So while I was searching for comments on the local council's Facebook, I found these comments to the announcement of one of my tours that I was doing in collaboration with them. And one said, Parque das Nações is good for those who do not live here. Would like to know the returns that the local council has with all these events. The residents are kept in jails. And another one, well, yes, tours only during the week, because at the weekends, the area is closed for concerts and events. Well, future research that can be conducted to this case study might include seeking answers to these questions, only to cite a few. So how do business benefit or are impacted by the event, and how to compensate them? How do different configurations of the use of public space impact the residents, business, and visitors? How to ensure events contribute for the well-being of the population, namely in regard to inclusivity and respect for the patrimony, and how to minimize in space and time the restrictions to the use of public space? How to ensure clear communication and commit to public participation in decision-making, and how to guarantee that conflicts of use and measures to mitigate them do not reduce the attractivity of the site for event owners and promoters. Now, to conclude, and I am finishing, I believe a pathway to answer these questions might be analyzed through the practices for the hosting of Superbox Superrock. This annual music festival used the same public space configuration as Eurovision, with one important difference. The precinct was opened every day until 3 p.m. So the impacts in the gym are residual, and luckily that was exactly the time I needed to conduct my tours, so I was not affected. And during the time the precinct was open, locals could go see some street artworks that the festival brought in, including the sculpture of a guitar designed by one of the most renowned artists in Portugal, which uses trash to build the sculptures. Also, Superbox Superrock paid for long for the maintenance of a garden right next to the arena, the music garden, which, because it is an interactive garden, is constantly requiring maintenance. So the festival contributed... I'm finishing. So the festival contributed to the preservation of the site. In 2018 was also the last year that the festival was hosted here, before it moved to its previous location. And with it, the guitar also moved away, but the popularity of the guitar made the artist to design a new sculpture to be permanently in the site, and thus leaving a permanent legacy to the area. So I would love to hear your questions and comments. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Gustavo. That was excellent and very professionally dealt with as well, I might add. We've got a couple of questions in the chat already. We can always go to a couple of others if need be. One from our leader, Professor McGillivray, who says, have people moved here, Gustavo, because of its regeneration in emerging area, or whether existing residents are now squeezed out?
I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat?
So the idea is there a process? Well, first of all, have people moved here because of the regeneration, or were there existing residents now being squeezed out, affected by the event focus? And their sub-question, is there a process in place to consult or engage regarding the likely disruptions?
Okay, so the area had nothing before. So there were some old neighborhoods, but not precisely in these areas that I was talking about. So everything was new. There was a strong policy for housing after the event, so everything was very well planned, and this is something that everyone in Lisbon, Portugal, are proud of how Expo 98 was dealt with. So the people moved there, and well, automatically the market, it made it an expensive residential area for higher social classes. And at the same time, there is these companies there and the events there. So everything is very well mixed, but at the same time, there are many conflicts, and the people, they are not being squeezed away from there. They like to live there, but they also like their public space. So in this case, in particular, 2018, it was 40% of the year that they had to deal with restrictions. Of course, we're talking about a specific year. Okay, Eurovision is not there every year. The Diamond Jubilee is not there every year, of course. But there are other events. And yeah, the second question, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, I do not study this. This is something that interests me, so I don't know how to answer that. I hope in the future. This was something that I prepared specifically for this conference.
No worries. That's a good holding answer. We'll have one more very quick one we've got here before we move on to Louisa's talk, and that is from Andrew Smith, who said it was fascinating. Thank you for that, Gustavo. And he went on to ask. He wondered whether the origins of the space, given it was an events precinct, means there's an expectation of event disruption. Any ideas on that? Or again, is that something as a holding paper you're not really in a position to respond to?
Yes. Well, yes, I understand your question, but yeah, it serves a very specific purpose, which is to host events, and it came to fill a lack of an event venue that we didn't have in Lisbon nor in Portugal. So the Altice Arena was something that we did not have. So Expo 98 brought that, but at the same time, it is thanks to the residents, thanks to the working population there, that the site survived. So I don't think it is fair to call it an event venue and to say that is expected that there's disruption. I think there are these different activities, different land uses, and that I think that work is needed to make them harmonious. And I don't think that exists in the place, because I was there. I saw it in first hand. So there is not that concern. Events are put over the needs and over the space of the population. There should be a better relation between the activities.
Good answer, Gustavo. I think we've got a few more questions in the chat, but I'm going to leave it and maybe return to them right at the end, because I know we gave you a bit of leeway because of the technical disruptions, and not the disruption Andrew was talking about, a different type of disruption. But let's go on. Thank you so much for that, Gustavo. It was great. But let's now go on.
I will answer in the chat. Yeah.
Thank you. Louisa, are you there, Louisa?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. And all ready to share?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, well, without further ado, I will pass on to hear our next speaker, Louisa Goltz, who's talking about dark tourism festivals post-pandemic and taking us from Portugal to the north of England to Whitby.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I couldn't have introduced myself better. So I'll just get started. Can you see my screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Brilliant. Okay. So as part of my research, I looked at dark tourism festivals. My name is Louisa Goltz. I'm based in Kilkenny, which is about an hour and a half south of Dublin. I'm a second-year PhD candidate at the Technical University of the Shannon in Athlone. And I suppose I started my research in October 2020, which was an unusual time to start festival studies. So it, I suppose, put a few stones in my way, if you can put it that way. But thankfully, I was able to visit the Whitby Goth Weekend for the first time last October. And I suppose today I'd like to present you with some initial findings from that visit. But maybe first of all, let's take a step back and look at what dark tourism actually is, because it's probably not a term that's familiar to everyone. It has gained some popularity recently, or a couple of years ago it was on Netflix, so a few more people might have heard of it. But what is dark tourism? So dark tourism has been studied in academia since the mid 1990s, and it's also known under the term thanatourism. Dark tourism refers to the activity of traveling to sites that are associated with tragedy, disaster, or the macabre. And when you study dark tourism, you are sure to come across Philip Stone's dark tourism spectrum. So basically, Stone argued that there is a very, very wide range of dark tourism sites, ranging from darkest to lightest. So if we look at the darkest side briefly, so those are sites of mass murder with locational authenticity and often have a commemoration focus. So those are sites of death and suffering. And those could include places like concentration camps, Holocaust memorials, 9/11, Ground Zero, and I suppose, as has been recently in the news as well, the Chernobyl reactor plant, which people actually travel to visit. And then there are lots of sites sort of in between that are not as dark as those sites. And then on the very right, you have the lightest dark tourism sites, which are sites that are merely associated with death. So those sites are usually quite high in tourism infrastructure and are often focused on entertainment. So, and I suppose I've been speaking about sites a lot, but it's not just all about sites. It can also be activities. So the activity of attending festivals that have death-related or dark or gothic themes is also dark tourism. And then just to give you an idea of what dark tourism festivals we have around the world, just sort of a very, a selection of them all is obviously not all of them. There is one that takes place regularly in Salem, the US. Very big connections there with the Salem witches. There's lots of Halloween-related festivals, also religious festivals, or like on the top right-hand corner there, the Wave Gothic Treffen in Leipzig, which I haven't been to myself, but which seems similar to one of my case studies, which is the Whitby Goth Weekend. So the Whitby Goth Weekend it actually happened last October, thankfully, and I undertook, or I'm hoping to undertake, primary research at two dark tourism festivals, which are the Bram Stoker Festival in Dublin and the Whitby Goth Weekend in the UK. So Bernadette actually told us earlier that she studied, or that she undertook research at Stokerland. So that's part of the Bram Stoker Festival. So I'm a little bit jealous to see that she was able to go there in 2019. I suppose the festival, the Bram Stoker Festival, was established to increase awareness about Bram Stoker and his connections to Dublin. So Bram Stoker, in case you don't know, is the author of Dracula, and he was born in Dublin. This festival takes place over Halloween since 2012 and has a strong focus on spooky encounters and family-friendly entertainment, such as Stokerland. The Whitby Goth Weekend, on the other hand, is a bit more well-established. It's a music and goth festival, and it takes place twice a year, every April and October since 1994, with a strong focus on gothic culture, costumes, and photography. Like I said, I've been able to go to the Whitby Goth Weekend last October, and I'm going to go again in April as well. And basically what I'm doing there is ethnographic research, participant observation, and to add to that, I'm interviewing people. Semi-structured interviews is what I'm doing in the festival space, so organisers, policymakers, but also locals and participants. So that's the two case studies that I'm looking at as part of my research. And I suppose to look at how these festivals responded to the pandemic. On the one hand, the Bram Stoker Festival in Dublin was staged online in 2020. I studied that in depth, and I wrote an article in the Journal of Dracula Studies. I know everybody always thinks it's funny, there is a Journal of Dracula Studies. But basically, I looked at how this festival went online and compared it to what went on with the festival in Whitby. And I suppose looking at post-pandemic, then the last in-person festival took place in 2019. But there are plans for this year to run the October 2022 festival under new management, which of course I will be at, all going well. So in 2020 in Whitby, then there was basically no official festival in person or online. But there are lots of groups on Facebook, for example, that commented on what it was like. I suppose they still turned up. For example, in April 2021, somebody said, "It really is very strange being here with the town being so quiet and nothing happening, missing everyone until hoping that we can all be back together in October." And thankfully, that's what happened. So in October, the first in-person festival took place again with very few restrictions. I noticed that, very intensively, I suppose, because in Ireland, the restrictions were quite strict at that point. In the UK, I suppose even the mask wearing was finished at that time. So that was, that how the festival ran post-pandemic. And it was a very interesting experience. So I suppose very, very initial findings from my post-pandemic festival visit to the Whitby Goth Weekend. I was able to see or observe that emotional involvement on the participant side is vital. So further research is needed, yet initial research confirms the importance of organisers connecting with participants on an emotional level. So the Whitby Goth Weekend, lots of people basically attend to see their friends, to make new friends, and to sort of return and feel like they're in this emotionally connected space. So just like one quote from one of the participants was just being amongst very nice people, and that she said when she had to, that she is sad when she has to leave. So that I suppose demonstrates how people are connected to the festival on an emotional level. Then looking at public spaces correctly and looking at local supports, I suppose initial observations confirm that public spaces are used in a beneficial manner in Whitby. For example, the festival itself is very spread out. Music events are restricted to specific venues, and the urban nighttime economy benefits from the influx of visitors. From speaking to organisers and locals, traffic is also managed well, and low rates of disturbances and crime have been reported since the first festival. So I was able to visit the pub, I suppose, where the festival started and speak to the organizer of the festival who started this festival, and she told me that basically the start of the festival, or the big thing, was to get the local publican where this festival happened on their side. So she said to me, on the first night of the festival, we must have made up 100 times of his normal trade. So this is a pub in Yorkshire, as you can imagine, maybe very quiet, usually just a few people at the bar. And she said that because the Goths were taking the glasses back to the bar and being polite in a way that other normal members of the public aren't, the publican was the biggest advocate for the Goths. And I suppose that illustrates how local support is very important when you stage these festivals. So I suppose then when we look at inclusion, and I suppose earlier it was very interesting for me to observe what people understand when under different types of inclusion, or what elements are included. And I suppose at the Whitby Goth Weekend, there is a very wide range of an audience, very wide range of people that attend. So the Whitby Goth Weekend attracts thousands of visitors twice a year and provides a platform and meeting place for members of the Gothic community, providing a safe space for people who may not be able to express their true identities in everyday life. So what I mean by that is, for example, you have people dressed up in these very unusual and Gothic steampunk type costumes. You have men wearing dresses, you have very old people, you have kids, you have dogs dressed up. So in terms of inclusion, that's sort of what I was able to feel, that those types of people are able to express their true identities in this safe space. But it's not just about the people that are different. I suppose it's also about the mainstream attendees who visit to enjoy the different costumes and the general atmosphere of the town. So the festival is very inclusive and not exclusively targeted at the Goths. People may also visit, I'm not sure why that moved, sorry. People may also visit the festival due to the Gothic elements, but it is evident that that wide audience exists and that this inclusive festival space facilitates the creation of wider audiences. And then I suppose just this is sort of my section on what I need to look into deeper, and what post-pandemic lessons we can learn from looking at these dark tourism festivals. And I suppose the question is, what do we want those festivals to do for us in the future? So I suppose going on, it's still important to create those inclusive and safe festival spaces so that alternative forms of tourism can be created, and I suppose that people can live out their identities at those festivals. It's important to encourage local buy-in to create benefits for the urban nighttime economy and to reduce pressures on public spaces in the post-pandemic era. The good thing about those dark tourism festivals that I've actually listed on the right-hand side is that they stretch the traditional tourism season into the off-season as well. So I suppose most of them take place around Halloween, when usually the Irish tourism season would be over. So instead of having everyone coming over in sort of between May and September, you might get people that travel to Ireland, and also local people obviously, who attend these festivals later in the year around November time. And this then, I suppose, alleviates pressure from the busy time and creates a more sustainable tourism economy. I suppose it's also important to look at who visits those festivals. So we want to attract the right type of visitor. So, for example, people who are culturally curious, who are socially minded, open-minded, and who create a low impact and minimize disturbances on people that actually live in those spaces. So I suppose my overall conclusion for now is that further research is needed to learn more of those lessons, and hopefully then in October, when I can attend the 3 festivals on the right and the Bram Stoker Festival, I'll be able to find out more about these things. So I thank you for listening, and I leave you with some more impressions of the 2 festivals that I'm studying. Thank you.
Louisa, that was super professional, because I kept being about to come in to say you've got 2 minutes, and you kept saying you're about to sum up, and you were perfectly 15 minutes.
Thank you.
It's a great presentation. I love the point about Goths being very polite. I was a student in Leeds in the 1980s and I always found them very, very polite. But and Leeds obviously being, in the 80s, especially the home of Goths in many ways. Sisters of Mercy and the Mission and other bands. Okay, we've got a few questions in the chat, so we'll return to these. First of all, Bernadette's asked, how does the darkness alter the festivals you're looking at?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Sure, sorry, my terrible diction. How does the darkness alter the festivals that you are looking at? The issue of darkness.
Well, I suppose it's interesting in that when I was speaking to people in Whitby, and like you said, Goths are very polite, everybody was actually wanting to speak to me, which I thought was great. People say that they see a beauty in darkness. So it's quite difficult to put into words, but it's not necessarily about that they go there and they contemplate death or something. It's something about dark aesthetics, I think they call it. So that's the connection there. And I suppose when you look at the other festival, the Bram Stoker Festival, it has a different focus. It's more about, I suppose, celebrating heritage and celebrating the author Bram Stoker. I suppose there is that character Dracula who's very dark, and where there's lots of references to gory things and death and blood and that kind of stuff. But underground, I suppose, it's a celebration.
Okay, it's sort of a follow-up question really to that from Jonathan Skinner, and he asks, is the Bram Stoker one more authentic than the Whitby one? Can you tell us a bit about authenticity in these festivals?
Yeah, so that's very interesting in that, to me, now unfortunately I wasn't able to attend the Bram Stoker Festival yet, but from what I'm looking at, I feel that the Whitby Goth Weekend is actually very authentic, because it was sort of founded by this one person who just put an ad in the paper and said, all my pen friends come into this pub and we'll just meet up as goths. And then it just grew and grew and grew by itself without having, let's say, the council involved or some big organization or big promotion. So the Whitby Goth Weekend also doesn't really advertise the events that are there. So people just turn up themselves. It's like a grassroots-led initiative, whereas the Bram Stoker Festival was initiated by Dublin City Council. So I suppose it was there to bring that link of Bram Stoker and Dublin to the forefront of people's minds. And there was a sort of a marketing strategy in behind it. And it's more this, there's a proper festival program, and there's different spaces where festival activities take place. So it feels like, I don't know if it's inauthentic, therefore I don't think so, but it's more structured and more planned.
Okay, that's really interesting. There's some more questions and comments in the chat. Alba's given you some ideas for future reading, and we've had some more bits around authenticity. We've got a question. I was going to make a seamless link to the next section by mentioning, I'm really interested when you talked about going online and the impacts and implications of that. And just when the lockdown kicked in in March 2020, there was a festival, not a goth festival or anything like that, but a festival on the south coast of England called Sea Change. And when Laura Barton reviewed it for The Guardian, she said, and I've written this down, that actually they had this worry beforehand that it was going to be really odd having a festival online. But she said, not once did it feel flat or lonely endeavour. Rather, it found a great swell of congregation. I think that's a really nice way, and a bit in the sort of way that Tim's Twitter listening parties made you sort of alone but together at the same time, and played on that sort of paradoxical idea. So some fascinating stuff. Some great other comments in the chat that you might want to look at as well, and Alba's given some links in there. Thank you so much for that. That was great, and sorry we can't go on a bit longer. Maybe we'll return to some of these at the end if there's time.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Okay, next on the list we have, I think it's Stefano, not Alberto. Stefano, talking about the Napoli Festival.
Thank you, yes.
Are you there, Stefano?
Yeah.
I know we heard from you earlier on.
Yeah.
Okay.
How can I need to share my presentation. I don't know which.
Yep. If Derek's here, he will guide you. If not, you've got the little bit open share tray.
Yeah, I'm trying to just with a share tray, but you cannot see my presentation now?
We can
see it.
I
can see it, Stefano.
You see it?
Yes.
Okay.
But we're seeing your editing mode, not your actual slideshow.
Yes, just go to Talent City. Can you see it? It's okay? Is it okay? Okay. So I'll start. Okay, Alberto Corbino is a professor in the Department of Political Science of the University of Naples. And well, he invited me. I am the director. I'm not a researcher, okay? I'm the director, so I'm giving you of the Open House Naples Festival. So I'm giving you a presentation of this case that is an international one, okay? Because Naples is part of the family of Open House worldwide. What is Open House? Open House is the global festival of architecture that was born by an idea of an association in London in 1992. And the idea of Open House is to create opportunities of festivals, dialogues about specific topics, architecture, design, and of course, in the end, cities. It's a way to reflect on the identity of the contemporary cities, involving people, because the core, the main event, made by every open house organization is this non-profit festival. So an entire weekend, imagine, with openings of the most, well, not only beautiful, but representatives, important, and often closed architectures of the city. I mean, we are talking about a huge number of locations of buildings, contemporary involved, more than 100 for every city. Consider that in London, there are at least, today after 30 years of the event, 700 different places. And it is completely free for the citizens. Everything is open for free. It means that the core of this event are the volunteers, the guys that are mostly university students, architects, historians, or professionals who make the visits, okay, who tell the stories of the places that people are going to visit. So it's an interesting farm, and we are talking about for every open house of 1,000 of visitors. What does it mean? Well, it means that the keywords, we can find 3 keywords of the logic of this festival. The first one, of course, it's opening the places more than 100, 200. It means that we try to involve the whole city with all the parts of the city, the center, the suburbs. It's important in our logic to create a common
Stefano,
yeah.
Sorry to interject. Your slides aren't moving on.
No.
You might need to go into presenter mode or to press the button to. We've only seen the first slide.
I think Stefano might be in presenter mode, but we're looking at a different. He's only sharing one window. But Stefano, if you wanted to stop sharing and then share your whole screen, it might work better.
I don't know. So you cannot see the presentation. Can you see now?
We can see certain slides, Stefano, but only at the moment it's saying the opening one. Opening places and minds.
Opening places and minds. Okay. Can you see the next one, connecting?
Not yet.
Not yet. I don't know.
Yep. We can see it now.
You can see it now. You see connecting?
Yep.
Okay. So okay, I'll go on. Sorry. So the idea is opening the first moment, opening places and opening minds, because it's common for big cities that the citizens themselves, they don't share the same city. They don't have a complete knowledge on the identity of the several parts of the city. They live a specific part of the city. So the idea is opening minds and connecting the places and connecting the people, connecting several types of citizens, the volunteers, the professionals, the common citizens, to give a different overview, a different idea on the identity of the city. So to sharing knowledge and sharing stories about the city. Another important element is what is reminded by the founder of the event, Victoria Thornton. In a statement, she said that open house allows a community as large as possible to gain more knowledge, okay, engage in dialogue, and make informed judgments about the environment of the future of the city. The future is an important element because with open house, we try to create at the same time to give a photograph of the past and the present of the city, but also we want to improve the dialogue about the future identity of the city. Pandemic is an element that reminded us how much architecture and urban problems, urban matter, are important to design the future of the city, to talk about smart city, to talk about pandemic, to talk about innovation, to talk about sustainability. So open house, it is an occasion to create for common citizens mostly, not for professionals, a way to reflect about this important topic. And this is the general system: Melbourne, New York, Lagos, Prague, Chicago, Helsinki, and so on. Born in 1992 with one city, today Open House Festival is a system of 50 cities with these numbers: 5 continents, 50 cities, 1 million visitors per year, 2,500,000 visits for every year, and 2,002 volunteers. And open house is also in Italy, with the main 4 cities, Rome, Milan, Turin, and starting with 2019, the festival I am director of, Open House Naples. We made three editions, and we are walking to for the next October 2022 for the 4th edition of Open House Naples. These are the numbers of every year, and it's important to emphasize some elements, because in the first year you can see there were almost 100 different experiences between locations, and urban walks is very important, the element of urban walks. The physical experience of the streets to...
Just to say, we're still on the connecting slide. I think you might want to push forward a little bit.
I'm going on, but you see only connecting.
Yeah.
The issue is we're looking at a different window to the one that Stefano is. So we're looking at his application, and he's in the screen share, or in the slideshow, I think.
Oh.
So Stefano, you could just stop sharing and then reshare and select screen, and
yeah,
then let me show your entire screen. Or if you're on, are you on one monitor or two?
It seems that it is, no, one. It seems that there is the presentation. Can you see it now? No?
Yeah, if you stay in this view and just move between the slides by clicking on them rather than using the slideshow, yeah, that will work.
Yeah.
So
can you see the one with Rome, Milan, Turin, and Naples now?
We see the first global festival of architecture with the continents, cities.
I am the continent cities. I am okay. The world map.
We're on the slide after that, I think.
We're on slide 21.
The first global fest architecture, yes. And you see now, can you see now the one with the 4 Italian cities?
No, we're seeing slide 21, the first global festival of architecture.
Yes, and I'm here now, and I'm going on the next one.
Okay.
Can you see it now?
No.
No.
Derek, what's it best? We'll give you
yeah, just very quickly, the presentation app has 2 windows. One of them is the editor and one of them is the slideshow. So Stefano, if you close your slideshow and go back into your presentation app as if you were editing your slides, then you can just, on the left, just go from slide to slide and we'll view them that way. Yeah, I think that would be better.
Try that, Stefano. We'll give you a couple more minutes.
Yeah, but I don't understand what to do.
Don't do the full screen presentation, just move to the slides as if you were creating them.
Okay, this way. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Don't worry.
Can you see it now? This way?
Yeah, we can see the whole application. So if, yeah, that's better, I think, to use this view instead.
Better with this close, okay, smaller version of it.
That's
okay.
Perfect.
Rome, Milan, open house, Italian, okay. And, well, this is the open house Naples Festival, okay? Now we are working on the 4th edition of it. And these are the numbers of every one of these first 3 editions, 2019, almost 100 locations and urban walks. And that's important, 7,000 visitors. The successive years, 2020, the situation is very different. In 2020, probably, if I'm not wrong, among the 50 organizations, we were, Naples, the only one able to arrange the material, the physical version of the festival, because we made it between the first and the second lockdown. And of course, the immediate element you see is that we had only 8,000 visitors due to COVID emergency restrictions. We were obliged to have tons of visits with a very small number of people for every visit. You see the image, of course, people masked. But it was very important for us to organize physically the festival, because we had an immediate impact on people, because it was maybe probably the first, in the October of 2020, the first physical event after months and months of lockdown. So we immediately felt not only the enthusiasm and interest of common people, okay, that had the opportunity to visit the places. But it was also an opportunity for the managers of every single location, for every hotel or public or private structure, because it was the general feeling of something that started again. So it was very impressive in that sense. And so in 2021, we had the opportunity to, well, slowly come back to a more normal situation. And it is very important in 2020 and 2021, the enhancement in urban walks, the idea of having this experiences not in the closed buildings, in the closed places, but of course in the areas, in the open area. That is from the, of course, from the point of view of healthcare for the general safety, it was better. Of course, the volunteers as a main part of the festival, but what is in the end, okay, this festival? Well, I like to say that what we are trying to do is to make a sort of a brief course on learning citizenship, because it is a way, open house, to share with common people, not with professionals, not with researchers, not with professors, the identity of the city. And Naples is a very complex city from the point of view of identity, because we are talking about a city with 25 centuries of history, okay? A city that was first settled in the 5th century before Christ. It means that Naples is a complex city made of several different cities, starting from the Greek period to the Roman one, and then following all the several and modern era from German, Spanish, and French dominations. It means that there are so many cities, Naples. So many cities, not only from one point of view, with this overlapping slash and continuous relationship between antiquity and the hyper-modernity of the new technologies. This is an image from the Neapolitan subway stations. And also, there is a relationship between the two cities, and more than two cities, the different layers, because under the surface, in the underground of Naples, there is the old city of the Greek era and the Roman era. And it is a way for the people to have a general overview, a complete overview on the complex identity of this city. Going, of course, also having an experience on so many different types of buildings, from infrastructures to, well, artist studios, or also another interesting element. Naples is not a city famous for the green, okay, for the urban green.
Stefano, you have 2 minutes. 2 minutes to go.
Yeah. I'm almost finished. There are also so many hidden places with gardens. And the most important thing I want to remember in the end of this presentation is this one. One of the main elements is the storytelling of the suburban area that are mostly the underdeveloped area of the city. And so we want to tell the stories of some places that people areas that citizens mostly don't know. Cases of urban regeneration in the eastern area of the city, like this one, Bridge 69, that is an old factory that was abandoned and now passed through a process of requalification, regeneration. Now is a place for offices and restaurants and so on. Or, for example, this is the new University of Medicine that is in the northern area of Naples, an area that is known, it is called Scampia, is unfamously worldly known for organized crime, for Camorra, for Gomorrah. And the process of transformation of this kind is to build the new University of Medicine in that area, to create, to regenerate and renovate an area that has so many problems. And it's the same logic always in the old industrial area of Naples, eastern Naples, putting the city of knowledge. This is the campus of the University Frederick II, where there is also the Apple Academy. So, I mean, the new innovative academies in an area with main problems regarding, of course, unemployment, with high unemployment rates. And this city of knowledge, this campus, was an old industry for the canning industry. And so it means that for us, the logic is to give opportunities to the common citizens to have a physical, material experiences of the whole dimension of the city, a process of inclusion that for us regards, well, going beyond the city of hierarchies, no, so putting the suburbs at the center of our storytelling of partially different storytelling of the city, giving inclusion also to another element, because we were the first one, the first open house worldly, that decided to create another format, the open house kids, with laboratories, readings, experiences, and visits targeted to the young people, so to
you need to put it to an end now.
And I am finished. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Sorry, I interjected.
Very sorry for the problems.
Stefano, no problem at all. These things happen, and it was a very wide-ranging and interesting talk. If you look in the chat, there's been quite a few observations about and suggestions. Some from Jonathan. You could look at about the table of contents from Paris to Pompeii, and then your conclusion. Actually, Alba raised a question about this earlier on. Let's go back to it somewhere. Hang on. Because Alba asked about inclusion, and Alba made the point that Open House Barcelona is a great event to make citizens and tourists aware of how the city is seen from the inside. But the real problem is the number of visitors. And I think you answered this to a degree at the end, but maybe just reinforce it now. It makes the event really exclusive rather than inclusive. What about Naples?
No, I cannot say that is an exclusive. I don't know the experience of Barcelona, especially. Of course, we have connections with all the other open house worldwide, but it's not very simple to create a very, very strong net. About Naples, our attempt is inclusive. Of course, this is not a very simple process. Okay, we need to create always more occasions. We as organizers of the event are every day discovering the city. I wanted to stress the element of the complexity of Naples because it is so. It is very difficult, and it is very difficult to create connection among people because it is true. Naples is also a city of exclusivity. We have the high-class areas of the city, maybe internationally famous, like the Posillipo areas. We have enormous, very huge contrasts in wealth among the populations of Naples. No, this is why I stress so much the problem of the suburban areas. And I need to admit one element. It is very simple for us to involve people, involve visitors, to visit the most famous places at the center of the city. It is very difficult to create the connection between center and suburbs and inviting people to discover the area of the suburbs, because mostly they think that they are dangerous. Okay, go to Scampia, the place of the organized crime, is dangerous. So our main attempt is to continuously create this connection. So inclusion is not the label or it's the final result of the event, a result that we are trying to create.
Okay, you've covered a lot there, Stefano. Thanks for that extra detail on inclusion. A couple of things just before we move on to Rotendo. Andrew Smith's mentioned which is brilliant, the London Open House event, and there's some links in the chat you might want to look at there. And Bernadette suggests you listen at 2 o'clock in the next session that'll be on after lunch. The Dublin speaker is going to be talking about the Irish Architecture Foundation's Open House Weekend, which he said is fantastic. So you might get some other ideas there and other comparative issues you could look at as well. But thanks for that, Stefano. Appreciate your talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rotendo, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Okay, there we go. Let me just share my screen briefly.
Brilliant. Thanks for waiting, and over to you, Rotendo.
Thank you. Okay, I believe you can see my screen.
We can.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. My name is Rotendo, as you can probably see on the screen, and I'm here representing the University of Westminster, where I work alongside Andrew. So thank you for this opportunity to speak to you about my topic, which really is looking at creative event spaces and the regeneration of Woolwich Works, which is a creative event space in the borough of Greenwich, and looking at the community of Woolwich Arsenal. So this is still brief in the sense that it is just really at the conceptual level, and it's still just a few of my ideas and thoughts in terms of what I would like to develop into a fuller paper over the summertime. So please feel free to observe, make suggestions, give corrections, etc. as we go along. So this really emerged from this idea of how are we going to kind of bring people back together in the post-pandemic era of events. So looking at use of festivals, looking at some of the ongoing debates on inclusion, our social behavior around community togetherness, ideas as well on improving social well-being, and the idea that bringing people together really does improve a sense of quality of life and well-being. So I'll just be discussing some of this in a little bit more detail and also sharing some of my thoughts in that regard. So I would like to also then perhaps explore the change to discourse in terms of the future of events, post-pandemic era, staying competitive as well in the post-pandemic era. So in terms of our different boroughs in London, also staying competitive, as we have seen through Andy's presentation, there are lots of other event spaces taking advantage of this post-pandemic era, where we've got a lot of festivals that are also trying to bring about the sense of inclusion. But I don't really think it should be an idea of competition. It really should be an idea of how can we leverage off this idea of inclusion and togetherness to bring about a more festive experience for the local community members as well. So just to give you a bit of background to Woolwich Works. So as I mentioned, Woolwich Works is a creative event space, which is located in the borough of Greenwich. And so this is in London, and this is in a community called Woolwich Arsenal. So how I first came about this particular space was last year, September, October, I was visiting my best friend who actually lives in this particular space. And she was talking about this particular event space that is opening up. And I do remember returning at the closer towards the event space being opened, and just seeing the buzz and the excitement within the community, and how people were really excited as to the idea of a new creative space that perhaps empowers the local community to take ownership of the sense of coming together and being festive in that regard. So if you may not know, this area of Greenwich, denoting to the Woolwich Arsenal area, was formerly the home of Arsenal Football Club, for those who are interested in football. But also this area has not necessarily always looked this way. It's gone through a lot of change over the years, and a lot of regeneration that has brought about a sense of gentrification to the area as well, which in consequence has also brought about perhaps a change in the face of the community, displacement and marginalization of others. And this brings us to the idea of inclusion. So inclusion of those community members who may feel that they are now on the fringes, who may feel that they don't have a sense of belonging to this particular community, and who may also feel that they're perhaps being pushed out by this new middle class that is perhaps now taking over this particular area. So even if you were to go to that particular borough now, you will see a lot of new builds, a lot of new high-rise buildings in the area, as well as a lot of different people that are also coming to live in this area. Another thing that has brought about a lot of attraction to this area is the new Crossrail line, which is the Elizabeth line. So if you're familiar with transportation in the in London, we have what we call the tube system, so the underground system, and also some of the overground rail connections that we have. So this particular connection brings a lot of people is intended to bring a lot of people to this particular area, but also perhaps marketing this area at a higher value. And again, that brings about this idea of exclusion again, and perhaps marginalization of some people who may not be able to now afford accommodation in that area, or afford, cost of living in that area because of all these changes that have perhaps left them behind. So this, I guess, brought about the idea of Woolwich Works, which is a multi-million-pound restoration project driven by the Royal Borough of Greenwich. It's intended to transform the historic side of the Royal Arsenal, so into a new creative district. So a space that should host multiple events and different events. And as well, using this particular space in a post-COVID recovery initiative. So the venue did open in September of 2021, so it's not even 6 months. Well, okay, perhaps 6 months thereabouts. And it formerly comprised of the historic buildings of the Royal Arsenal space. So it's got an element of heritage to it as well, which is quite exciting and interesting if you ever do get a chance to go visit. And the space is run by an independent trust, which was set up by the Greenwich Council. So proceeds really are dedicated to creating opportunities for the people in the borough. So again, this idea of trying to empower the local community, trying to bring the local community into a sense of ownership in the way that the creative event spaces are being used as well. So the type of events that typically have been hosted here since opening up in September, live music, theatre, comedy, exhibitions, community events, small parties. I might even mention that best friend of mine who I referred to at the beginning, she was looking to have her baby shower in one of the spaces. So that really does give you a sense of a wide range of events that take place in that particular space. So the essence of it really is to support the local community, to empower the local community, and to also enable them to realize their creative potential. So also tapping into that local talent that exists, also creating a space where people can also be educated on perhaps the history of the area. As I mentioned, there's an element of heritage in terms of Arsenal FC as well. And then there's also an element of heritage in terms of the diverse cultural communities that exist within this area. So education through learning from each other, co-creating events, as well as sharing knowledge in this particular space. So it's quite an exciting space. I've managed to walk around it and also take some pictures. These are not my pictures though. I got them off their website, but it is an interesting space. And as summer is approaching, they've got quite an exciting lineup of events, which I will go through in a few moments as well. So some of those forthcoming events, as I mentioned, we've got comedy that is intended to come through. We've also got some music festivals, and we've also even got live celebration events taking place, celebrating Amy Winehouse. So a lot of the artists tend to come from this particular area. They might not necessarily live in this community anymore. They've probably gone further afield, but it's coming back and perhaps sewing back into that community and also perhaps investing in that grassroots talent. And as you can see as well, this is a very diverse array of performers as well, which speaks to the area itself and the type of people you will likely see there and the type of energy you also likely experience when you visit this particular area as well. So this, for me, is particularly exciting, and I look forward to actually going to one or two of the events and perhaps taking some pictures and perhaps also speaking to attendees, both from the community and perhaps people visiting the community, and also speaking to perhaps the organizers and the people managing this particular space to understand the impact of the space and to understand the influence on community togetherness and those threads of social engagement, interaction, co-creation of knowledge, and the idea of people just being in harmony and uniting over a shared experience. So just to touch a bit on the academic elements. So I do intend on drawing on community accounts, as I mentioned, to better understand how this creative event space can be a conduit that can restore a particular place, and restoration in the sense of inclusion, especially including those who may perhaps have felt marginalized or excluded at a particular point. So this idea of being a social ingredient to the societal transformation of a particular place. And I'll be drawing on the lens of Turner's communitas to be able to perhaps understand aspects of human behavior in that particular borough, and to understand customs, cultures, and how perhaps, in as much as this place has regenerated, how we can, adopt these new different social behaviors post-COVID, and to encourage people to still come together and embrace their cultures and unique way of life in this particular community. So some of those elements which I've already touched on, the characteristic ideas around principles of mutual engagement, people bonding together over shared experiences, as well as how perhaps this can enlighten us to explain how people can be brought together, despite having felt perhaps excluded, marginalized, or overlooked over a shared experience that unites people. And perhaps share more light or a new lens on how we can form new group practices or establish a sense of group acquaintance that could offer insight into developing strategy or policies around managing creative spaces in the post-COVID era. And then that way helping us to connect to perhaps the use of creative event spaces and urban development and restoration of a particular community. So in terms of the next steps, I will be looking to collect my data over the summer period, really towards May, June, July, thereabouts. And as I briefly mentioned, I do want to have conversations with community members, people that are visiting or engaging in some of these events, people that are also curating some of these festival celebrations in those spaces, etc., and also some of the people behind this particular creative space. And then once I've collected my data, I do hope to write up my first draft by the summer and then take it from there. So that's it from me. Open to any questions, and I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rotendo. You stopped me having to come in and say 2 minutes. You're fantastic. That's really interesting. We've got a few comments in the chat. I think let's go through those. Before we do, it sounds like you've got a real passion for it. You really, love the space and love the whole ideas going on there. And I like the way you talked about empowerment as part of it. I guess is it sometimes we say, do they walk it like they talk it? We talk the language of empowerment, but do they walk it? Do you think they do, or is that what you're going to find out in your next stage of your research?
So far from what I've seen, they seem to be, putting their money where their mouths are, or in that regard. Even in as much as I've said, local community members are actually able to use that space for, personal celebrations, and at a subsidized cost, and it gives the community a sense of ownership of their particular spaces as well. So if you have, property there, or if you live in the area, you probably are looking to host your event in that space rather than going elsewhere. So, I mean, I would like to see it in action as well over the summertime as their event portfolio expands and we start to see a more varied nature of events come to the community as well.
Okay, great. We've got a question here from Andrew Rotendo. What difference does it make that these events are indoors?
That's a good one. More so in terms of over the summertime when we expect the temperatures to go up. But I think perhaps the space might be well used over the winter times when the weather's not so great out here. But I also, having been there's also an outdoor space of sorts. So typically over the weekends, they have a market right outside where the village workspace is. So my assumption is they might also take advantage of that space. There's a lot of restaurants in the area, so pop-up little restaurants, etc. So I believe they might be able to take advantage. I've seen those outdoor open cinemas as well being used there. So I believe perhaps they might take advantage and leverage on those spaces around them.
Okay, fantastic. There's some more material in the chat, Rotendo, you might want to look at. Dave has just posted something about possible comparisons, I think, in Paisley. It's gone now, the message, and some other bits and pieces. So maybe have a look at that. But I thought it was great and really enjoyed that. And actually, somehow, I don't know how we've done it, but we've actually got back on time. And we've finished at the right time. So I think I'm actually going to close it down now in that respect.
Thank you so much.
Everyone's been brilliant. And they've all been great papers anyway. But thank you all as well, all the audience, for listening and for giving the great comments there. And it's been really, really enlightening and superb. And there's a lot of the talk has been about how we've gone all over Europe as part of this. And I think Andrew Smith's going to put together a big proposal about us going on a boat around all these places. But anyway, thank you all so much for that. It's been brilliant. Hope you're all going to come back at 2 o'clock for the panel discussion on festivals, public space and inclusivity. Lots of great stuff. And then around for the rest of the afternoon. But thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the day. And well done. Good work all round. Thanks, everyone.